All righty. So anybody knows me knows that I'm all about the money. I feel like that's what everything boils down to. That is what Martin Luther King died for, with second-class citizenship and trying to get us our silver rights in terms of our coins. So we are now going to transition into the educational aspect, because without education, we can't do anything. We can't inform people. We can't learn from our history, nor can we come together to learn how to build future innovation. So I'm so excited to have Mr. William Wells, who genuinely lives at the intersection of all of those things in Kansas City. He was tapped to be one of the few people across the country to create the new Envision Centers that are happening out of HUD, and many other amazing things that this man does. If there is something to be done in STEM for Black people or diversity and inclusion, this man is in the midst of it, whether on the front lines or behind the scenes. So excited to have you today, Mr. William Wells, and I'm now going to transition it over to you.
All right. So thank you, Angel, and Freddie and the entire MIT hashtag Black Tech Matters team for allowing me to present. I will share my screen if that's okay, and I want to make sure that I share my video. So I want to do my presentation a little differently because we got some great content going on here. And I just want to kind of break things up. So in the middle of this presentation, I'm going to show an 8-minute video that I believe is going to connect education, healthcare, and racism. And I just want to cue that video up, and then I'll let us discuss what we see and field any questions. But before we go there, a little bit about us. aSTEAM Village, we have the wonderful program that is not a school. We are not a school. However, we do see students year round. Our students come to us on Fridays from 6 to 8, Saturdays from 1 to 5. And in the summer, we host an 8-week, Monday through Friday, 9 to 5 summer camp. Summer camp is an onboarding for our fall, winter, spring program, where we actually put the students in competitive robotics, race car engineering, drone racing. We do that to get them to know how to learn, work as a team, communicate, all of the soft skills, problem solving, data analytics, critical thinking. Foundation of our program, BDPA, which has a heavy focus in computer science and engineering, NSBE, the National Society of Black Engineers, and then DigiPen Institute of Technology, which is the #3 ranked game design post-secondary institution in the United States. So I want to start this off with us thinking education is an important institution to all things that we're talking about in our country, and it's an economic driver if you think about it. And I posted this sign here. We tell our young people to follow their dreams. And we are at the beginning of our program this fall. We are talking to the students about planning their goals, long-term, short-term, daily, and how do you work towards that. And I thought I would include this because these kids have big dreams. 4th grade, 8th grade, 9th grade, 11th grade, 12th grade. They want to go to big places. They want to come to MIT. They want to go to Harvard. They want to go to the HBCUs. They want to go to Juilliard. Even though they're in STEM, they're not all about science, technology, engineering, and robotics. So let me tell you the state of Kansas City, Kansas, and Missouri. This was done by my mentor, Dr. Carl Reed, the executive director of NSBE, and this data comes from the Kansas City Public Schools. So we have 15,500 pre-K through 12th grade students enrolled in Kansas City. 85% of them are Black and Latinx. In Kansas City, Kansas, we have 22,000 students enrolled, and 52% of Wyandotte County is Black and Latinx. And I'm going to say that that breakdown is probably in most of our large cities. Look at our graduation rate. Kansas City, Missouri, 65.3%. Wyandotte County, 74.85%. Wyandotte County would be Kansas City, Kansas, just so I can make sure I connect those dots. Let's look at the high school graduation rate who met all 4 ACT college readiness benchmarks. 22% in Missouri, 29% in Kansas. Think about that. From pre-K to 12th grade, these kids come in with dreams. Is the school system taking those dreams and deleting those dreams, or could we be doing more to help the school system? Can we be doing more as parents to help? How can we get these students and get these young people and make them be a part of our economy? They don't have to wait till they graduate to have some great ideas that can be implemented at a city, state, and national level. 15 Missouri high school graduates who met the ACT STEM readiness benchmark. It goes even lower, 15%. Kansas high school graduates, 21.6%. So how are we going to get them so that they can be a part of healthcare and making it more equitable for everybody? How do we get them to a point where they can actually be doctors and go to MIT? So this slide here, I think that it comes with defining what is education. And I love this quote by Dr. King, upper left. The function of education is to teach one to think intensively and to think critically. Intelligence plus character, that is the goal of true education. If you're a student, I was one of them, that wasn't my definition of education. My definition of education was going to school, listening to a teacher, getting an A or getting an F. And a lot of kids, if they get an F, they let that F define them. With our program not being a school, what we tell them is we give them an F and we help them go through that apply the engineering design process and the scientific method to move that F to a D, the D to a C, C to a B, B to an A. And once they've gotten to that A, they've learned. But we didn't hand them fish, we taught them how to fish. So going to the right, 10 things that require zero talent. If we define education as that, then we can move over to being on time, work ethic, effort, body language, energy, attitude, passion, being coachable, doing extra, being prepared. Nothing in the above is defined by GPA, ACT scores. It's just being good people, right? And if we want to eradicate racism, where we need to be intelligent, we need to be educated, and we have to be good people. And that leads me to the accountability of self. Who are you, right? So now I move to my last slide with Dr. King. Rarely do we find men who willingly engage in hard, solid thinking. There's an almost universal quest for easy answers and half-baked solutions. Nothing pains some people more than having to think. If we cannot bring up a group of young people that are not afraid to think, that are not looking for easy wins, shortcuts, but are willing to go through the process and willing to become lifelong learners, I think that is a root of everything that we're trying to address through this hackathon and many other initiatives. So here's the video. I would like to share it. Please, somebody tap me if you cannot hear the sound. It's about 8 minutes, but I think it will be a good lead in and frame a discussion, a Q&A.
Every country on earth at the moment is reforming public education. There are two reasons for it. The first of them is economic. People are trying to work out, how do we educate our children to take their place in the economies of the 21st century? How do we do that? Given that we can't anticipate what the economy will look like at the end of next week, as the recent turmoil is demonstrating. How do we do that? The second, though, is cultural. Every country on earth is trying to figure out, how do we educate our children so they have a sense of cultural identity and so that we can pass on the cultural genes of our communities while being part of the process of globalization. How do we square that circle? The problem is they're trying to meet the future by doing what they did in the past. And on the way, they're alienating millions of kids who don't see any purpose in going to school. When we went to school, we were kept there with a story, which was if you worked hard and did well and got a college degree, you would have a job. Our kids don't believe that. And they're right not to, by the way. You're better having a degree than not, but it's not a guarantee anymore. And particularly not if the route to it marginalizes most of the things that you think are important about yourself. Some people say we have to raise standards if this is a breakthrough. You know, like, really, yes, we should. Why would you lower them? You know, I mean, I haven't come across an argument that persuades me of lowering them. But raising them, of course we should raise them. The problem is that the current system of education was designed and conceived and structured for a different age. It was conceived in the intellectual culture of the Enlightenment and in the economic circumstances of the Industrial Revolution. Before the middle of the 19th century, there were no systems of public education. Not really. I mean, you could get educated by Jesuits, you know, if you had the money. But public education, paid for from taxation, compulsory to everybody and free at the point of delivery, that was a revolutionary idea. And many people objected to it. They said it's not possible for many street kids, working class children, to benefit from public education. They're incapable of learning to read and write, and why are we spending time on this? So there's also built into it a whole series of assumptions about social structure and capacity. It was driven by an economic imperative of the time, but running right through it was an intellectual model of the mind, which was essentially the Enlightenment view of intelligence. That real intelligence consists in the capacity for a certain type of deductive reasoning and a knowledge of the classics originally, what we come to think of as academic ability. And this is deep in the gene pool of public education, that there are really two types of people, academic and non-academic, smart people and non-smart people. And the consequence of that is that many brilliant people think they're not, because they've been judged against this particular view of the mind. So we have twin pillars, economic and intellectual. And my view is that this model has caused chaos in many people's lives. It's been great for some. There have been people who have benefited wonderfully from it. But most people have not. Instead, they suffer this. This is the modern epidemic, and it's as misplaced and it's as fictitious. This is the plague of ADHD. Now, this is a map of the incidence of ADHD in America, or prescriptions for ADHD. Don't mistake me here. I don't mean to say there is no such thing as attention deficit disorder. I'm not qualified to say if there is such a thing. I know that a great majority of psychologists and paediatricians think there is such a thing. But it's still a matter of debate. What I do know for a fact is it's not an epidemic. These kids are being medicated as routinely as we had our tonsils taken out, and on the same whimsical basis and for the same reason, medical fashion. Our children are living in the most intensely stimulating period in the history of the earth. They're being besieged with information and calls for their attention from every platform, computers, from iPhones, from advertising holdings, from hundreds of television channels. And we're penalizing them now for getting distracted. From what? You know, and Adderall and all manner of things, often quite dangerous drugs, to get them focused and calm them down. But according to this, attention deficit disorder increases as you travel east across the country. People start losing interest in Oklahoma. They can hardly think straight in Arkansas. And by the time they get to Washington, they've lost it completely. And there are separate reasons for that, I believe. It's a fictitious epidemic. If you think of it, the arts, and I don't say this exclusively of the arts, I think it's also true of science and of maths, but I say about the arts particularly because they are the victims of this mentality currently, particularly. The arts especially address the idea of aesthetic experience. An aesthetic experience is one in which your senses are operating at their peak, when you're present in the current moment, when you're resonating with the excitement of this thing that you're experiencing, when you are fully alive. An anesthetic is when you shut your senses off and deaden yourself to what's happening. And a lot of these drugs are that. We're getting our children through education by anesthetizing them. And I think we should be doing the exact opposite. We shouldn't be putting them asleep. We should be waking them up to what they have inside of themselves. But the model we have is this. I believe we have a system of education that is modeled on the interests of industrialism and in the image of it. I'll give you a couple of examples. Schools are still pretty much organized on factory lines, ringing bells, separate facilities, specialized into separate subjects. We still educate children by batches. You know, we put them through the system by age group. Why do we do that? You know, why is there this assumption that the most important thing kids have in common is how old they are? You know, it's like the most important thing about them is their date of manufacture. You know what I mean? Well, I know kids who are much better than other kids at the same age in different disciplines, you know, or at different times of the day, or better in smaller groups than in large groups, or sometimes they want to be on their own. If you're interested in the model of learning, you don't start from this production line mentality. It's essentially about conformity, and increasingly it's about that as you look at the growth of standardized testing and standardized curricula. And it's about standardization. I believe we've got to go in the exact opposite direction. That's what I mean about changing the paradigm. There was a great study done recently of divergent thinking. Published a couple of years ago. Divergent thinking isn't the same thing as creativity. I define creativity as the process of having original ideas that have value. Divergent thinking isn't a synonym, but it's an essential capacity for creativity. It's the ability to see lots of possible answers to a question, lots of possible ways of interpreting a question, to think what Edward de Bono would probably call laterally, to think not just in linear or convergent ways, to see multiple answers, not one. So, I mean, there are tests for this. I mean, one kind of cod example would be people might be asked to say, how many uses can you think of for a paperclip? Well, those routine questions. Most people might come up with 10 or 15. People who are good at this might come up with 200. And they do that by saying, well, could the paperclip be 200 foot tall and be made out of foam rubber? You know, like, does it have to be a paperclip as we know it, Jim? You know. Now, they tested this, and they gave them to 1,500 people. This is in a book called Breakpoint and Beyond. And on the protocol of the test, if you scored above a certain level, you'd be considered to be a genius at divergent thinking. Okay? So my question to you is, what percentage of the people tested, of the 1,500, scored at genius level for divergent thinking? Now, you need to know one more thing about them. These were kindergarten children. So what do you think? What percentage at genius level? 80. 80, okay. 98%. Now, the thing about this was it was a longitudinal study. So they retested the same children 5 years later, ages of 8 to 10. What do you think? 50? They retested them again 5 years later, ages 13 to 15. You can see a trend here, can't you? Now, this tells an interesting story, because you could have imagined it going the other way, couldn't you? You start off not being very good, but you get better as you get older. But this shows two things. One is we all have this capacity, and two, it mostly deteriorates. Now, a lot of things have happened to these kids as they've grown up. A lot. But one of the most important things that happened to them, I'm convinced, is that by now they've become educated. You know, they've spent 10 years at school being told there's one answer, it's at the back. And don't look. And don't copy, because that's cheating. I mean, outside schools, that's called collaboration, you know, but inside schools. Now, this isn't because teachers want it this way, it's just because it happens that way. It's because it's in the gene pool of education. We have to think differently about human capacity. We have to get over this old conception of academic, non-academic, abstract, theoretical, vocational, and see it for what it is, a myth. Secondly, we have to recognize that most great learning happens in groups, that collaboration is the stuff of growth. If we atomize people and separate them and judge them separately, we form a kind of disjunction between them and their natural learning environment. And thirdly, it's crucially about the culture of our institutions, the habits of the institution and the habitats that they occupy.
So, Hopefully I can get to the next screen. Sorry. My last slide is, let's rap about it. Hello? Anybody there?
Thanks a lot, William. It was really, really nice and really engaging for me. And it actually, like as a student at MIT, it was really, really interesting because most like in 2015, MIT made a lot of promises about like involving a lot more Black people and giving them some rights, and then having some DEI people on each department. But we have seen that in 5 years, MIT hasn't done anything. At least they haven't prioritized these issues. So I want to look from a different perspective in the light of a question we received. What if the top universities like MIT are racist institutions? No matter how well prepared your students are, they might not be able to go to top universities if they're racist institutions, racist in quotes. So what do you think about this problem?
Well, that's a difficult question for me to answer. I think that our students need to be able, MIT is just one of many, right? I have students, I showed you in that first slide, their dreams are to go to MIT and go to Harvard. If they came to me, I probably would tell them, you really should consider Howard. If you're looking at engineering, you really should consider Prairie View A&M, one of the North Carolina A&T. If they want to do game design, I'm probably going to refer them to a DigiPen. Not about what the institution is, but what does it offer, and how does it perform as far as producing successful candidates for where they want to go, right? So I try to stay away. I mean, we can't stay away from racism, right? It's there, it's around us. My goal is to try to teach these young people how to make it be noise, pursue to become successful, and become a part of the solution. That's why we've pretty much mandated all of our students sign up for this Hacking Racism hackathon, because we knew that they would be exposed to all of the great minds, professional students that are part of this, that Angel and Freddie have put together.
I think promoting STEM education plus STEAM education is really crucial. And I think it depends on your exposure. Like if you're growing in a community where you don't have any STEAM exposure, then it's unlikely for you to be involved in that community later on in your stages. So I think you're doing a lot of in that space. And where do you see your program going in the later stages? Like,
well, what we're trying to do is basically create a blueprint. We're working with several people. I think Angel mentioned that we're working with Envision Centers. We're working with local government. What we're trying to do is create a blueprint, right? Because the same problems that exist here in Kansas City, in the urban area, exist in Great Moore Peculiar, which is a rural area. And what the goal is, I mean, just like your hackathon, you're trying to get them to come up with some solutions that can move from concept to reality to solve problems. And I think that's what we're trying to do with our program. We're trying to say, how can we get these high school kids involved on these capital construction projects now and not later, because then that's going to address economics. When you address economics, then you can start to address racism. You can start to address quality of life. Quality of life, you can address healthcare, right? Because I can afford to go to the doctor. I can afford to get my medicine. I can look after my mom. So it's all interconnected, and it's not going to be easy. It's going to take some complex thinking, and it's going to take us to be able to move the ball over to these young people because they have some brilliant ideas.
I think, as you suggested, most of these things are connected, and I think it depends on your socioeconomic status as well. The lower your socioeconomic status, the more unlikely it is for you to reach higher education. And one of the hurdles is basically the exams. For example, if you would like to go to medical school, you need to take MCAT, and also for college, you need to take these kind of like standardized tests. And as you've shown in your video, that's actually not what you want to have. You would like to actually like promote more diversity in thinking. So like coming back to the hacking racism, what can we actually address about education during our hackathon? What are the areas that we can potentially address, our teams can address during the hackathon?
There's a saying that I like to call, it's called lift while you climb, right? The truth of the matter is, if you are a college student and you are at an MIT or a Prairie View or North Carolina A&T, you're still climbing, right? But the fact is that your sustainability is going to be dependent upon those behind you, those that are in elementary school, those that are in middle school, those that are in high school. So how can we, and I think that COVID, there is no shining light of COVID, but the one thing it's enabled us to do is it's enabled us to say, we got to sit at a computer and I have to tap into knowledge that's outside of my community, outside of my city, or if you're quarantined, outside of my own, right? And technology enables us to do that. So lift while you climb. I mean, find time to engage these kids, not for just a one-time event, not for a photo op. I heard the young man say before me about a photo op. No, engage them in a way, because you'll be surprised at some things that you're working on as a professional or as a college student. They have some great ideas that may be able to help you, just like you have a lot of knowledge and you've walked in some paths that they're trying to go down, that you can help them. It's going to take that. It's going to take an all-hands approach. Education has to be, the classroom is not where education happens. The world is where education happens. The world is a classroom. It doesn't do any good to have this beautiful facility on 31st Street and a kid comes here and they spend their time here, or they come to this beautiful school that's gotten funded and made new and has a beautiful, and then they have to go back to a community where that environment is not looking the same. That environment that's not looking the same is a classroom. And you can teach that child teach them how to identify problems and come up with solutions inside of that community to make their home environment better, so that it's better for their little brothers and little sisters, their mom and dad, great grandma, great grandpa, and their aunts and nieces.
I think setting up good role models is really key. But at the same time, like looking from a different perspective, I see this like this is a personal thing. And I see this kind of a hackathon as a means to educate myself about racial issues. So if you put a little bit of twist, how can actually individuals educate themselves about racial issues going around themselves? Because to be honest, I think that I was blind to certain issues that were actually transpiring around myself. Like today was a really good revelation for me. So how can we educate ourselves about these racial disparities?
It's real simple. Reach out and touch somebody you don't know and get to know them, and allow them to get to know you. The only way that you're going to break any of this down is if you're able to reach out and touch some students. And I see it all the time. You know, at a school, when a child goes to school, they're going to get their assignment, they're going to get taught the lesson, they're going to be given a test, and they're going to be expected to pass the test, or they'll fail the test, right? Depending on what they learn. If they didn't get it, they're going to move on. And the more times they move on and I don't understand it, the worse off I'm going to be. So you got to reach out and touch people and realize, and do it with empathy, right? Because you don't know that kid who just lost their mom, or their dad was taken into custody, or their auntie was pulled over and went through heck. You don't know people's lives. Everybody has lives. And if we don't reach out and talk to people, you're right. We will go through and we will be blind and we will not understand. And so it's really as simple as reaching out and touching somebody. And to me, herd mentality is brilliant minds, good people coming together and working together and identifying problems and coming together and brainstorming solutions and then taking those solutions from concept to reality. And there's where your innovation is going to be driven.
I definitely agree with that. Like innovation plus communication is the key. Thanks a lot, William. I wish we had more time and then we could speak more. Thanks a lot for joining today.
Thank you for having me. I hope I didn't let Angel and Freddie down. And everybody, let's have a wonderful hackathon and let's make some change in this world.
Thanks, William. I'll hand it to Angel right now. Thanks.